Welcome back. I'm going to now talk about section 3 of the paper towards an interactional approach to sustainable community development. And this section is fairly short and really seeks to set a definition of sustainable development that the authors plan to use in the additional portions of the paper, and does so by drawing on work by another author, Batie, who is attempting to kind of bring together the things that are common in the constrained growth definition and in the resource maintenance definition. So rather than viewing these as two opposing definitions, trying to look for things that they have in common. And that's represented by the 6 bullet points that you find in section 3. And so I won't read them each directly except for the second one, but I will kind of give you, that's sort of what's the high level here. So first one, perception that the biosphere, that is the natural resources, impose a limit on economic growth. So that's just an acknowledgement that economic growth cannot continue without bound because of limits that will be reached with regard to natural resources. The second one of these I wanted to actually talk a little bit about because it connects to our class theme of technology. So what is it? It's an expressed lack of faith in science or technology as the primary means by which human betterment can be achieved. Okay, so this doesn't say we don't have faith in science or we don't have faith in technology, but rather that an expression that not to look to those, and let's focus particularly on technology here, not to look to technology as the primary means by which you can make things better for people. And here it's probably helpful if you remember the kind of point, this is consistent with the point made in that chart that plot that we talked about as part of Monday's breakout discussions. So of course you'll remember there that the release of a set of technologies that are all very familiar and very embedded in our lives, the time points at which those were released were marked on a chart, and then the poverty rate in the United States was also marked, and a takeaway from that was that actually the release of those technologies had very little impact on the poverty rate. So that if you were a believer that technology can be a primary means to make society and human life better, you certainly would have guessed that there was a positive relationship between the release of technologies and decline in the poverty rate, and that chart showed that was not the case. So this doesn't mean that we have to kind of distance ourselves or disown technologies as having the potential for some positive impact. The key part of this phrasing here is as the primary means. So and we're going to see that throughout the class, the kind of limits and potentials of technology to make a difference in societies and in people's lives, with a connection to the larger ecosystem of nature as well. The additional common elements of this sort of proposed definition for sustainable growth are of extreme aversion to environmental risks, so not wanting to do everything possible to stay away from the potential for great risk to the environment. The next one is an interesting one. It uses a phrase, redistributive justice, that is probably not familiar to most of you. Also the phrase egalitarian ethics and policies. So this bullet is about equity and fairness, and redistributive justice actually has to do with like it seems to say, redistributing justice. So overcoming or making amends for past injustices by some redistribution of advantage or redistribution of value, to recognize that in the past, some groups and people have borne greater burdens for growth, basically. And we're going to be talking about environmental justice, very much falls under this category. Number 5, concern over population growth and faith in the wisdom of human capital development. So believing in the value of developing people and their capabilities, and attending to population growth. This doesn't say, doesn't suggest extreme policies, but does say that population growth should be in the conversation. And then last, survival of the species and protection of the environment and minority cultures. So elevating those to an equal or potentially greater, but equal level with economic growth. So the argument here is that this definition, while it looks more like the constrained growth version, that it still is inclusive enough to allow for compromise and an acknowledgement of the value of resource maintenance, kind of coming about through probably the last couple of bullets in that definition. Okay, so that's section 3, and I will record a third video that finishes out the rest of the paper.